Standing at my backyard barbecue, watching my autistic son Marcus play peacefully with his toys, I never expected my sister Rachel to deliver the most devastating blow of my life. Her laughter still echoes in my mind as she casually mentioned how she had been sabotaging Marcus's therapy applications for 2 years, ensuring he would never get the specialized help he desperately needed. "Your son will always need help," she said with that twisted smile, "and now you know why." The truth about my own family's betrayal was just beginning to unfold. Hey everyone. Before we dive into this shocking family drama, I want to know, where are you watching from today? This story about family betrayal and the ultimate revenge will blow your mind, so make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because you will not believe how this twisted tale of sisterly sabotage ends. Trust me, the justice served in this story is absolutely satisfying. My name is Vivian Torres, and I thought I knew my family. For 34 years, I believed my sister Rachel was my closest ally, especially after our parents died in a car accident when I was 25. She had been my rock when my husband David left me 3 years ago, unable to handle Marcus's autism diagnosis. She was there when I cried myself to sleep, worried about providing for my 8-year-old son's expensive therapy needs on my teacher's salary. But that summer evening changed everything. The barbecue was supposed to be a celebration. I had finally saved enough money to apply for Marcus's spot at the prestigious Riverside Behavioral Center. The waiting list was long, but their success rate with children like Marcus was incredible. Rachel arrived late, her designer handbag swinging as she strutted into my modest backyard like she owned the place. "Still throwing money at that lost cause?" she had sneered, watching Marcus line up his toy cars by color. The comment stung, but I was used to her occasional insensitivity. What I was not prepared for was what came next. As I grilled burgers, trying to keep the conversation light, Rachel's phone rang. She answered it right there, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, Dr. Patterson. Yes, I got your message about the Torres application. You can go ahead and reject it. We discussed how the child is not suitable for your program." My blood ran cold. Torres was my last name, Marcus's last name. I turned from the grill spatula trembling in my hand. "Rachel, what are you talking about?" She ended the call and looked at me with this expression I had never seen before. Cold, calculating, almost pleased. "Vivian, sweetie, we need to talk." The other guests, my coworkers and neighbors, sensed the tension and started making excuses to leave. Soon it was just Rachel, Marcus, and me in the backyard. Marcus, oblivious to the adult drama, continued playing with his cars, humming softly to himself. "You called Dr. Patterson about my son's application?" My voice was barely a whisper. Rachel sat down at my picnic table like she was settling in for a long conversation. "Oh, Viv, I have called so many people over the past 2 years. Dr. Patterson, the Wilson Institute Harmony Springs Therapy Center, even that expensive place in Denver you were saving for. Did you really think it was coincidence that Marcus kept getting rejected?" The world tilted. I gripped the back of a lawn chair to steady myself. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have been protecting you from yourself." Rachel's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. "You keep throwing money at this hopeless situation, exhausting yourself, bankrupting yourself for a kid who will never be normal. I have been doing you a favor." "A favor?" The word came out as a croak. "Think about it, Viv. Every time you applied somewhere, they would call for references, family references, professional references. I made sure they understood that Marcus is violent, unpredictable, that you are an unstable single mother who cannot handle reality." She paused to check her manicured nails. "It was not hard to convince them." I staggered backward, my mind reeling. 2 years of rejections. 2 years of being told Marcus was not a good fit, that other children were better suited, that maybe I should consider less intensive options. 2 years of watching my savings dwindle on inferior programs that barely helped, while the good centers remained mysteriously out of reach. "You posed as a reference," I managed to ask. "Oh, honey, it was much more sophisticated than that. I am a pharmaceutical sales rep. Remember, I know people in the medical community. Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Children's Hospital. She and I went to college together. She was happy to make a few calls on my behalf, expressing concerns about Marcus's behavioral patterns and your emotional stability. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that I could barely process it. This was not a moment of anger or jealousy. This was systematic sabotage spanning years of my child's development. But why? The question tore from my throat. Why would you do this to Marcus? To me? Rachel stood up, smoothing her expensive blouse. Because I am tired of watching you waste your life on damaged goods. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have a sister whose entire existence revolves around a retarded kid? I flinched at the slur. Do not call him that. What should I call him, Viv? Let's be honest here. Marcus is never going to be normal. He is never going to have friends, never going to graduate, never going to give you grandchildren. You are throwing away your youth, your career prospects, your chance at happiness for a kid who does not even understand what you are sacrificing. He is my son, I whispered, and he is a burden you choose to carry. But I will not let you drag the rest of the family down with you. Rachel picked up her purse. Mom and Dad left us both money, but you have been spending yours on therapies and treatments and special schools. Meanwhile, I have been building a real life. I bought a house, I am dating a successful man. I have a career that actually matters. The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This was my sister, the person who had held me when I cried, who had helped me move into this house, who had been Marcus's favorite aunt. You sabotaged your own nephew's future. I said the words, feeling surreal. I saved you from bankruptcy and delusion. Rachel headed toward the gate. When you finally accept reality and put Marcus in a state facility where he belongs, you will thank me. Your son will always need help, Vivian, and the sooner you stop fighting that truth, the sooner you can start living again. She paused at the gate and looked back with that same twisted smile. Oh, and Viv, I also made sure your application for that teaching position at Riverside Elementary was rejected. The principal is a friend of a friend. I told them you were unreliable, too distracted by your personal problems to be effective in the classroom. Then she was gone, leaving me standing in my backyard with the smell of burned burgers and the sound of Marcus's gentle humming. My entire world had just collapsed, but my son played on innocent of the war that had been waged against his future. The first week after Rachel's revelation passed in a blur of rage, grief, and planning. I called in sick to work, unable to face my colleagues while processing the magnitude of my sister's betrayal. Marcus, sensing my distress despite his autism, stayed closer than usual, occasionally bringing me his favorite toy dinosaur, his way of offering comfort. I spent hours on the phone, starting with Dr. Patterson at Riverside Behavioral Center. When I explained that the person who had called pretending to be a family reference was actually sabotaging Marcus's application, the confusion in his voice was evident. Mrs. Torres, I have to tell you, we received very concerning reports about your son's behavioral issues and your family's inability to commit to our intensive program. The person who called identified herself as Rachel Torres, claiming to be Marcus's aunt and your emergency contact. She is my sister, but she has been deliberately sabotaging Marcus's applications without my knowledge. I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Everything she told you was a lie. There was a long pause. This is quite serious, Mrs. Torres. We base many of our admission decisions on family references and support systems. If what you are telling me is true, we need to completely reevaluate Marcus's application. I have documentation of every therapy session Marcus has attended, every progress report, every evaluation. I can prove that her claims about his behavior were fabricated. Dr. Patterson agreed to reopen Marcus's file, but warned me that spots for the fall session were now filled. We would have to wait until spring, another 6 months of delay in my son's critical developmental window. Next, I called Dr. Sarah Mitchell at Children's Hospital, the woman Rachel claimed was helping her spread lies about Marcus. This conversation was even more revealing. I remember those calls, Dr. Mitchell said after I explained the situation. Your sister was very convincing. She said she was concerned about Marcus being placed in programs that were too advanced for his needs and that you were in denial about the severity of his condition. Did she provide any medical documentation to support these claims? She said she had observed concerning behaviors during family visits and that you had become hostile when previous programs tried to discuss Marcus's limitations with you. She seemed genuinely worried about both of you. The sophistication of Rachel's lies was staggering. She had not just made random accusations. She had crafted a believable narrative that painted me as a delusional mother and Marcus as a dangerous child. She had weaponized the medical community's natural caution about liability and used it against my son. But Dr. Mitchell's next words gave me hope. Mrs. Torres, if what you are telling me is true, this is a serious case of medical fraud and child endangerment. I would be willing to help correct any misinformation I may have inadvertently spread. That afternoon, I drove to my local library and spent 4 hours researching. I needed to understand exactly what Rachel had done, and more importantly, what I could do about it. The legal implications were staggering. Fraud, interference with medical care, possibly even child endangerment, if her actions could be proven to have harmed Marcus's development. I also researched Rachel's life more carefully than I ever had before. Her pharmaceutical sales job gave her access to medical professionals across 3 states. Her social media presence showed a lifestyle that seemed expensive for her declared income: designer clothes, frequent vacations, a luxury car. Where was all this money coming from? The next breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Henderson. My elderly neighbor knocked on my door with a casserole and some surprising information. Vivian, honey, I hope you do not mind me saying, but I could not help overhearing some of the conversation at your barbecue last week, she began hesitantly. That woman, your sister, she said some terrible things. I invited her in, grateful for any adult conversation that might help me process what had happened. The thing is, Mrs. Henderson continued, I recognized her voice. She has called me twice over the past year claiming to be from your son's school. She asked very personal questions about Marcus's behavior when he plays in the yard, whether I had ever seen him have violent outbursts, whether you seemed overwhelmed or neglectful. My blood ran cold. What did you tell her? Well, I told her the truth, that Marcus is a delightful child who plays quietly and creatively, and that you are one of the most dedicated mothers I have ever seen. But she kept pushing, asking leading questions, trying to get me to say something negative. Mrs. Henderson shook her head. It felt wrong, so I hung up. But now, knowing what I know, I think she was gathering ammunition against you. This was even worse than I had thought. Rachel had not just been sabotaging Marcus's applications. She had been building a case against my parenting, collecting statements from neighbors, and possibly others, that could be used to question my fitness as a mother. That evening, after Marcus was asleep, I called my closest friend from college, Jamie, who was now a family law attorney in Chicago. I had not spoken to her in over a year, but she listened patiently as I explained the situation. Vivian, what you are describing could constitute several crimes: fraud, interference with medical care, possibly harassment. But more importantly, if Rachel has been systematically trying to build a case that you are an unfit mother, she might be planning something bigger. Like what? Like trying to gain custody of Marcus, or having him removed from your care entirely. Think about it. If she can convince authorities that you are delusional about his needs and that he is dangerous, she could petition for guardianship or even have Child Protective Services investigate you. The thought had never occurred to me, but it made horrible sense. Rachel's comments about putting Marcus in a state facility, her systematic destruction of his therapy opportunities, her gathering of negative statements about both of us, it could all be part of a larger plan. But why would she want custody of Marcus if she thinks he is such a burden? I asked. Money, Jamie said bluntly. If your parents left both of you inheritances, and if there are trust funds or life insurance policies that name Marcus as a beneficiary, Rachel might be positioning herself to control those assets as his guardian. I felt sick. My parents had indeed left a substantial trust fund for Marcus's care and education managed by me until he turned 25. If Rachel could convince a court that I was unfit, she could potentially control hundreds of thousands of dollars. Jamie, I need your help. I need to protect my son and expose what Rachel has done. You need more than legal help, Viv. You need evidence, documentation, and witnesses, and you need to be very careful. If Rachel suspects you are onto her plan, she might accelerate her timeline. That night, I began documenting everything. Every rejection letter, every phone conversation, every interaction with medical professionals. I created a timeline of Rachel's sabotage and started reaching out to everyone she might have contacted. It was going to be a long fight, but for Marcus's future, I was prepared for war. The investigation into Rachel's web of lies revealed a conspiracy far more extensive than I had imagined. Over the next 3 weeks, I methodically contacted every therapy center, school, and medical facility that had rejected Marcus over the past 2 years. The pattern that emerged was both infuriating and heartbreaking. At Harmony Springs Therapy Center, the intake coordinator remembered Rachel's call vividly. She identified herself as Marcus's aunt and legal guardian, the woman told me over the phone. She said you had given her permission to speak on your behalf because you were too emotionally unstable to handle the rejection yourself. Legal guardian. I repeated, my pen frozen over my notepad. She claimed to be Marcus's legal guardian. Yes, and she provided what seemed to be legitimate documentation numbers. We have them on file if you would like us to verify them. This was fraud on a level I had not anticipated. Rachel was not just lying about Marcus's condition. She was forging legal documents to gain authority over his medical decisions. When I requested copies of the documentation she had provided, my suspicions were confirmed. The guardianship papers were elaborate forgeries, complete with fake court seals and notary stamps. My next call was to Detective Maria Santos at the local police department. I had gone to high school with Maria, and she agreed to meet me privately to discuss the situation. Vivian, what you are describing is identity theft, fraud, forgery, and potentially child endangerment, Maria explained as we sat in her patrol car outside Marcus's school. But building a prosecutable case is going to require solid evidence and multiple victims willing to testify. I have documentation from 6 different facilities showing the same pattern of interference, I told her, handing over my growing file. And I think there might be more victims. Maria flipped through the documents, her expression growing more serious with each page. This level of systematic deception suggests she has done this before, possibly to other people. Have you considered that you might not be her only target? The thought had not occurred to me, but it made sense. If Rachel was comfortable committing fraud to control Marcus's medical care, she might have used similar tactics against others. Maria agreed to open an official investigation, but warned me that it could take months to build a case strong enough for prosecution. Meanwhile, I was building my own network of allies. Dr. Patterson at Riverside Behavioral Center had become an unexpected advocate after reviewing Marcus's legitimate medical records. Mrs. Torres, your son is exactly the type of child our program was designed to help, he told me during a private consultation. The reports we received about his behavior were not just inaccurate, they were the complete opposite of what his actual evaluations show. Dr. Patterson agreed to testify about Rachel's deception if the case went to court, and he also connected me with other families who might have experienced similar sabotage. Through this network, I discovered that Rachel's interference was not limited to autism therapy centers. Linda Vasquez, a single mother from the next town over, contacted me after Dr. Patterson shared her information. Her daughter Sophia had been rejected from the same programs as Marcus, apparently based on similar fraudulent references. The woman who called about Sophia claimed to be my sister-in-law. Linda told me when we met for coffee. She said Sophia was violent and that I was in denial about her disabilities. But I do not have a sister-in-law, and Sophia has never shown any aggressive behavior. We compared notes and discovered that Linda had also been rejected for the special education teaching position at Riverside Elementary, the same position Rachel had sabotaged for me. The pattern was becoming clear. Rachel was systematically targeting single mothers with disabled children, destroying their opportunities for both employment and medical care. But why? Linda asked. What could she possibly gain from hurting our children? The answer came from an unexpected source. My former brother-in-law, David's older brother Michael, called me out of the blue one evening. Michael worked in insurance fraud investigation, and he had heard through family channels about my situation with Rachel. Vivian, "I think you need to look into Rachel's financials," he told me. "What you are describing sounds like someone building a portfolio of dependent children for fraudulent benefit claims." "What do you mean? If Rachel can establish herself as the legal guardian or advocate for multiple disabled children, she can apply for federal assistance, disability benefits, medical grants, even charitable donations on their behalf. It is a sophisticated form of welfare fraud." The pieces clicked into place. Rachel's expensive lifestyle, her detailed knowledge of medical systems, her ability to forge legal documents. She was not just sabotaging Marcus out of cruelty. She was running a long-term scam that required keeping disabled children dependent and their mothers isolated. Michael offered to help me trace Rachel's financial records, and what we found was staggering. Over the past 3 years, Rachel had applied for and received federal assistance for 7 different children claiming to be their legal guardian or family advocate. She had collected over $200,000 in fraudulent benefits grants and charitable donations. Marcus was not even her primary target. He was just one child in a larger criminal enterprise. But knowing this made me even more determined to stop her. She was not just hurting my son. She was systematically destroying the futures of vulnerable children across multiple states. The breakthrough came when Detective Santos called with news that would change everything. "Vivian, we have been investigating similar complaints in Colorado and Nevada. Rachel Torres appears to be running the same scam in multiple states using different names and identities." Different identities? Rachel Torres, Rebecca Torres, Raquel Thompson, Rachel Martinez. She has been using variations of her name and fake documents to establish herself as an advocate for disabled children while stealing benefits intended for their care. This was bigger than I had imagined. Rachel was not just my sister who had betrayed me. She was a career criminal who had been using family connections to access and exploit vulnerable children. The investigation was now being handled at the federal level, with charges including mail fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. But federal investigations move slowly, and I could not wait for justice, while Marcus continued to lose precious developmental time. I needed to act faster, and I needed to be strategic about protecting not just Marcus, but all the children Rachel had targeted. I began coordinating with the other mothers she had victimized, sharing information, and building a collective case. Linda Vasquez introduced me to 3 other women who had similar experiences, and together we started documenting not just Rachel's fraud, but the damage it had caused to our children's development. The most powerful ally came from within Rachel's own professional network, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. The woman Rachel had manipulated into spreading lies about Marcus was horrified when she learned the full scope of the deception. "Mrs. Torres, I cannot adequately express how sorry I am," Dr. Mitchell told me during a meeting at Children's Hospital. "Not only am I willing to testify about how your sister deceived me, but I want to help undo the damage. I have connections throughout the medical community who can help expedite Marcus's applications and correct the false information in his records." Dr. Mitchell became instrumental in rebuilding Marcus's reputation within the medical community, personally, calling colleagues to explain how they had been deceived. Within 2 weeks, Marcus had been accepted into 3 different therapy programs, including an emergency spot at Riverside Behavioral Center that opened up when another family moved out of state. But as we were building our case and securing Marcus's future, Rachel was apparently becoming aware that her scheme was unraveling. The first sign of trouble came when Mrs. Henderson called to tell me that someone had been watching my house. "This story is getting intense, right? The web of lies is finally unraveling, but Rachel clearly is not going down without a fight." What do you think? Should Vivian have seen the signs earlier, or was Rachel just that good at manipulation? Let me know in the comments, and make sure you are subscribed, because the next part reveals just how far Rachel will go to protect her criminal empire. The phone call that changed everything came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Detective Santos's voice was urgent but controlled. "Vivian, we need you and Marcus to pack immediately and go to your friend Jamie's house in Chicago. Rachel has discovered our investigation, and we have reason to believe she might try to harm you or take Marcus." My blood turned to ice. What happened? One of our informants in the pharmaceutical industry tipped us off that Rachel has been asking questions about witness protection protocols and emergency custody procedures. She also purchased a plane ticket to Mexico under one of her false identities. We think she is planning to either eliminate witnesses or flee the country with assets she can liquidate. I was already moving toward Marcus's room, my phone pressed to my ear. Assets? What assets? The trust fund your parents left for Marcus. We discovered that Rachel has been slowly transferring money from multiple fraudulent accounts into offshore holdings. If she can establish legal guardianship over Marcus, even temporarily, she can access his trust fund and disappear with over $400,000. The enormity of her plan hit me like a physical blow. This was never just about sabotaging Marcus's therapy. It was about stealing his entire future, his inheritance, his life. And she was willing to destroy anyone who stood in her way. Within an hour, Marcus and I were on the road to Chicago, our most important documents hidden in my purse and our clothes thrown hastily into 2 suitcases. Marcus, confused by the sudden departure, kept asking if we were going on vacation. I told him we were visiting Aunt Jamie, which seemed to satisfy his need for routine and explanation. But Rachel was already one step ahead. Jamie called when we were halfway to Chicago with devastating news. Vivian Rachel filed an emergency petition for custody of Marcus this morning. She is claiming you have had a mental breakdown and are planning to flee the state to avoid getting Marcus the help he needs. That is insane. How can she file for custody? She has a lawyer, and she presented what appear to be medical documents showing that Marcus is in immediate danger due to your emotional instability and denial of his condition. The documents are probably forged, but the court has to take emergency custody petitions seriously. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Rachel was using my love for Marcus, my determination to get him proper care, as evidence that I was unfit. She had turned my strengths as a mother into perceived weaknesses, painting my advocacy as obsession and my dedication as delusion. There is more, Jamie continued. She also filed a report with Child Protective Services, claiming that you have been neglecting Marcus's medical needs and that several family members and neighbors have expressed concerns about his safety. I pulled over at a rest stop, my hands shaking too badly to drive safely. Jamie, this is all lies. She is the one who has been sabotaging his medical care. I know, and we are going to prove that, but right now there is an active warrant for your arrest for custodial interference, and an Amber Alert has been issued for Marcus. We need to get you back to face this legally, not as fugitives. The next 12 hours were the longest of my life. Jamie arranged for us to surrender to authorities in Chicago, where she could immediately petition for an emergency hearing. Marcus, still not understanding the gravity of the situation, was placed in temporary foster care while I was held pending the custody hearing. Sitting in that jail cell, knowing my son was confused and scared without me, I felt the full weight of Rachel's manipulation. She had not just stolen opportunities from Marcus, she had weaponized the very system designed to protect children, turning it against us. But Rachel had made one critical mistake. Her greed had made her sloppy. Detective Santos called Jamie with the breakthrough we needed. We raided Rachel's apartment and found everything: forged documents, fake identities, detailed files on 12 different families she was targeting, and financial records showing she has stolen over $600,000 in fraudulent benefits. The evidence was overwhelming. Rachel had kept meticulous records of her crimes, apparently confident that she would never be caught. She had files on each family, including photographs of the children, copies of their medical records obtained through fraud, and detailed plans for accessing their trust funds and benefits. But the most damning evidence was a recorded phone conversation between Rachel and an unknown accomplice discussing their plan to have me declared mentally incompetent and Marcus placed in a state facility where Rachel could control his care and finances. She literally recorded herself planning to commit fraud against your son, Detective Santos told Jamie. We also found evidence that she has been drugging you during family visits, slipping sedatives into your drinks to make you appear unstable when she brought medical professionals around. The pieces fell into place. Rachel's insistence on making me coffee during her visits, my inexplicable fatigue and confusion after she left the Times, I had seemed unusually emotional or disoriented during important phone calls with doctors. She had been systematically poisoning me to support her claims about my mental instability. Within 24 hours, the charges against me were dropped, and Marcus was returned to my custody. But Rachel's arrest made national news exposing the full scope of her crimes across multiple states. The FBI had identified over 20 families who had been victimized by her fraud ring, with total losses exceeding $2 million. The other mothers I had connected with during our investigation became key witnesses in the federal case. Linda Vasquez testified about how Rachel's interference had delayed her daughter's critical speech therapy for 18 months. 3 other mothers shared similar stories of sabotaged applications, forged documents, and stolen benefits. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's testimony was particularly devastating. She explained in detail how Rachel had manipulated medical professionals using her pharmaceutical industry connections to gain credibility while spreading lies about vulnerable children and their families. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Marcus himself was allowed to testify. Despite his autism, he was able to clearly explain how mean Aunt Rachel had made him take medicine that made him sleepy during important doctor visits, and how she had told him that Mommy did not really love him because she was always trying to fix him. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Rachel Torres was found guilty on 14 federal charges, including mail fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, child endangerment, and racketeering. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to all her victims. As I watched the bailiff lead Rachel away in handcuffs, she turned to look at me one last time. There was no remorse in her eyes, no recognition of the children she had harmed or the families she had destroyed. There was only rage that her carefully constructed criminal empire had finally collapsed. Justice had been served, but the real victory was yet to come. The aftermath of Rachel's conviction rippled through every aspect of our lives in ways I had never anticipated. Within a week of her sentencing, Marcus and I received apology letters from 19 different medical facilities, therapy centers, and educational institutions that had rejected his applications based on Rachel's fraudulent information. Dr. Patterson at Riverside Behavioral Center was among the first to reach out personally. Mrs. Torres, I want you to know that we have completely purged Marcus's file of any information provided by your sister, and we are expediting his enrollment in our most intensive program. Additionally, we are waiving all fees for his first year of treatment as acknowledgement of the harm our institution inadvertently caused. The financial restitution from Rachel's conviction was substantial. Marcus received over $120,000 as compensation for the therapy time lost due to her sabotage. But more importantly, doors that had been closed to him for years suddenly swung wide open. The Wilson Institute, which had rejected Marcus twice based on Rachel's lies, not only accepted him immediately, but offered him a spot in their pilot program for gifted children with autism. The program director, Dr. Emily Chen, personally called to apologize and explain how thoroughly they had been deceived. Your sister presented herself as a concerned family member trying to protect Marcus from programs that were too advanced for his needs, Dr. Chen explained. She provided detailed behavioral reports that made him sound violent and uncontrollable. The reality, based on his actual evaluations, is that Marcus is intellectually gifted and would thrive in our most challenging academic environment. But the most surprising vindication came from an unexpected source. Riverside Elementary School, where Rachel had sabotaged my application for a teaching position, called to offer me the head of their new special education department. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, was mortified when she learned how she had been manipulated. Mrs. Torres, your sister contacted me claiming to be a reference from your previous school district. She painted a picture of someone who was overwhelmed by personal problems and unable to maintain professional boundaries with students. The truth, based on your actual references and credentials, is that you are exactly the kind of educator we desperately need. The irony was not lost on me. Rachel's attempts to destroy my career had ultimately led to my dream job heading a department specifically designed to help children like Marcus. Yet the most profound changes were happening within our family dynamics. With Rachel's toxic influence removed, Marcus began to flourish in ways that amazed everyone around him. Dr. Patterson noted significant improvements in his social interactions within just 2 weeks of starting the intensive program. It is remarkable, Dr. Patterson told me during one of our weekly conferences. It is almost as if Marcus was holding back somehow, sensing the negativity and sabotage around him. With that removed, his natural abilities are emerging rapidly. Marcus himself seemed to understand in his own way that something fundamental had changed. He started sleeping better, had fewer meltdowns, and began initiating conversations with other children for the first time. His teachers reported that he was not just meeting developmental milestones, but exceeding them. The ripple effects extended beyond our immediate situation. The federal investigation into Rachel's crimes had exposed a nationwide network of benefit fraud targeting disabled children. Her conviction led to policy changes in how emergency custody petitions are evaluated and how family references are verified for medical programs. Linda Vasquez and I became advocates for other families who had experienced similar fraud. We started a support group called Stolen Futures, which helped parents navigate the process of correcting fraudulent medical records and rebuilding relationships with treatment providers. Within 6 months, we had helped over 40 families recover access to services that had been sabotaged by various fraud schemes. The financial impact of Rachel's crimes became clearer as the investigation continued. In addition to the direct theft of benefits and trust funds, her sabotage had cost families hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost opportunities, inferior treatments, and delayed interventions. The total economic damage exceeded $5 million across all her victims. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came during the asset recovery process. Federal investigators discovered that Rachel had been planning an even larger scheme. They found detailed files on over 60 families with disabled children across 8 states, complete with financial profiles, trust fund information, and strategic plans for gaining access to their assets. Your sister was not just running a fraud operation, Detective Santos explained during a final briefing. She was building a criminal organization specifically designed to exploit vulnerable families with disabled children. You stopping her when you did prevented dozens of other families from being victimized. The scope of her ambition was breathtaking. Rachel had been recruiting accomplices in the medical and legal communities, offering them percentages of the stolen benefits in exchange for providing false documentation and fraudulent references. The FBI identified 12 co-conspirators across multiple states, all of whom were subsequently arrested and convicted. Most disturbing was the discovery that Rachel had been targeting families specifically during times of crisis, after divorce, death of a spouse, or major medical diagnoses. She had been monitoring social media obituaries and hospital records to identify vulnerable single parents who would be most susceptible to her manipulation. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court as part of her sentencing revealed a level of calculating cruelty that even seasoned prosecutors found shocking. Rachel showed no empathy for the children she had harmed, and no remorse for the families she had destroyed. Her only regret, according to the psychologist, was that she had been caught before completing her larger scheme. During the victim impact statements at her final sentencing hearing, I chose to speak not about Rachel's betrayal of our family bond, but about Marcus's resilience and the future she had tried to steal from him. Your Honor, my sister did not just commit financial fraud. She attempted to steal my son's potential, his education, his chance at independence and happiness. But children like Marcus are stronger than people like my sister understand. Despite her sabotage, despite the delays and obstacles she created, Marcus is thriving. She tried to convince the world that he was damaged and hopeless, but the truth is that Marcus is brilliant, loving and capable of achievements that will far exceed anything my sister ever accomplished through her crimes. As I spoke, Marcus sat in the gallery wearing his new school uniform and holding the Academic Achievement Award he had received just that week from the Wilson Institute. He was living proof that Rachel's assessment of his potential had been not just wrong, but deliberately, maliciously false. The judge's final words to Rachel, before imposing the maximum sentence, captured the sentiment of everyone in that courtroom. Ms. Torres, you targeted the most vulnerable members of our society, disabled children and their families, for personal profit. Your crimes were not just financial fraud, but attacks on hope itself. The children you tried to destroy are thriving despite your efforts, while you will spend the next 15 years contemplating the futures you tried to steal. 2 years after Rachel's conviction, Marcus and I stood in the auditorium of the Wilson Institute, watching him receive the Student of the Year award for exceptional academic achievement. The same child Rachel had tried to convince the world was hopeless and violent was being recognized as one of the most promising students in the program's history. Dr. Emily Chen, who had become not just Marcus's teacher, but a family friend, spoke at the ceremony about his remarkable progress. Marcus Torres represents everything beautiful about the human capacity to overcome adversity. Despite systematic attempts to limit his potential, he has not only met every challenge we have presented, but has exceeded our highest expectations. Marcus, now 10 years old and more confident than I had ever seen him, walked to the podium with the careful precision that characterized everything he did. His acceptance speech was brief but profound. "I want to thank my mom for never giving up on me, even when other people said I could not learn. And I want to thank my real family, the people who chose to love me and help me grow." His words about real family versus blood family resonated through the audience, but they hit me deepest of all. Over the past 2 years, we had built something Rachel's betrayal could never touch. A chosen family of people who supported Marcus, not despite his autism, but because they recognized his unique gifts. This chosen family included Dr. Patterson, who had become a mentor and advocate, Linda Vasquez and her daughter Sophia, who had become our closest friends through shared experience, Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor, who had testified against Rachel and now spent afternoons helping Marcus with his homework, and Jamie, whose legal expertise had saved us, but whose friendship sustained us. The financial restitution from Rachel's conviction had been substantial, but the real wealth we had gained was immeasurable. Marcus's trust fund, originally worth $400,000, had been restored and actually grown through investment of the restitution funds. More importantly, his access to world-class educational and therapeutic resources was now unlimited. At Riverside Elementary, where I now headed the special education department, we had implemented new protocols for verifying family references and identifying potential fraud targeting vulnerable students. The Marcus Torres Protection Protocol, as it was informally known, had already prevented 3 attempted fraud cases in our district alone. My work with Stolen Futures, the advocacy organization Linda and I had founded, had expanded nationally. We now provided resources and support to over 300 families who had experienced various forms of medical or educational fraud. Our success rate in helping families recover lost services and financial compensation was over 90%. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was watching Marcus develop relationships with children who valued him exactly as he was. His best friend Alex was neurotypical, but fascinated by Marcus's encyclopedic knowledge of dinosaurs and his ability to solve complex math problems in his head. Their friendship was built on mutual respect and genuine enjoyment of each other's company, something Rachel had insisted would never be possible. The legal ramifications of Rachel's case continued to reverberate through the system. Her conviction had led to federal legislation strengthening protections for disabled children and their families. The Vulnerable Child Protection Act required multiple independent verifications for any emergency custody petitions involving disabled children and mandated criminal background checks for anyone claiming to advocate on behalf of such children. 3 of Rachel's co-conspirators had been sentenced to prison terms ranging from 5 to 12 years. The corrupt medical professionals who had participated in her scheme lost their licenses and faced separate criminal charges. The entire network of fraud she had built was systematically dismantled, protecting countless future victims. During one of our final court appearances related to asset recovery, I learned something that fundamentally changed how I understood Rachel's motivations. Court documents revealed that she had been deeply in debt due to gambling addiction and had been stealing from her employer for over 3 years before targeting our family. Her elaborate scheme against disabled children was not just cruelty, it was desperation. She had needed large amounts of untraceable money quickly, and vulnerable families represented easy targets with limited resources to fight back. Understanding this did not excuse her crimes, but it helped me move from anger to something closer to pity. I chose not to tell Marcus about Rachel's financial motivations. For him, it was enough to know that someone who should have protected him had instead tried to hurt him, but that justice had prevailed. He rarely asked about his mean aunt, and when he did, I simply reminded him that some people make bad choices and have to face consequences. The final resolution came when Marcus turned 11 and received a full scholarship to attend the prestigious Hawthorne Academy, a school for gifted children with learning differences. The same child Rachel had tried to institutionalize was now being recruited by elite educational institutions that recognized his exceptional potential. At Marcus's graduation from the Wilson Institute's elementary program, I was asked to speak about our journey. Standing at the same podium where Rachel had once tried to destroy our lives through legal manipulation, I shared what I had learned about resilience, justice, and the true meaning of family. 2 years ago, my son was systematically denied access to programs that could help him thrive, not because he lacked ability, but because someone who should have loved him chose instead to exploit him. Today, he is proof that children are stronger than the obstacles placed in their path and that truth ultimately prevails over manipulation. I looked out at the audience, teachers, parents, advocates, and friends who had become our chosen family, and continued. We learned that family is not determined by blood, but by who chooses to support your growth, celebrate your achievements, and stand with you against those who would harm you. Marcus and I are grateful for our real family, the people in this room who saw his potential when others saw only limitations. As applause filled the auditorium, Marcus walked over and took my hand. In that moment, I realized that Rachel's betrayal, as devastating as it had been, had ultimately led us to something better than we had before. We had found our tribe, built our strength, and proven that justice, while sometimes delayed, is never truly denied. The final irony was that Rachel, in trying to prove Marcus would always need help, had actually demonstrated the opposite. Marcus had not just survived her sabotage, he had thrived beyond her worst nightmares. And the help he needed was not the institutional care she had envisioned, but the love and support of people who chose to see his brilliance rather than his challenges. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that made you question everything you believed about blood loyalty? Have you found that chosen family can be stronger than biological connections? Marcus's story proves that justice might take time, but it always finds a way. Share your thoughts about family karma and whether you believe people like Rachel always get what they deserve in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding your true tribe. And do not forget to share this video with anyone who needs to hear that children are stronger than the people who try to limit them. Thank you for being part of our chosen family here, and remember, your potential is never determined by those who cannot see your worth. Until next time, keep choosing love over loyalty and truth over comfort.